It's no secret that for the past couple years, the iPad Pro especially has dominated the tablet industry. So much so, people are beginning to use it over laptops thanks to portability, battery life, pen, and optimized experience. But does the Apple Magic Keyboard make it a real laptop replacement? I've always liked the way the iPad Pro looked. It's minimal, futuristic, as you can expect from any device today, albeit remaining practical. Apple may have updated almost nothing on their 2020 iPad Pro, but the keyboard is brand new and an official one that a lot of us have been waiting for. In the past, a smart keyboard may have been enough, but with the amount of power and capability, people wanted more. A proper mechanical keyboard, a trackpad, and a desktop-like app experience, one that the iPad OS has shown signs of, but still has a lot of work to do. But with the hardware edition, we could be one step closer. So today we're going to take a look at the iPad Magic Keyboard that starts at a price of $300, and as someone who is a little bit skeptical but also a bit annoyed that mine took so long to arrive, I've had a good experience with it, but I think it's important that we take a look at both the details of the product and also the offerings that you can get for the same price, whether it is a combination of a smart keyboard and a pencil or even going for a MacBook. If you guys haven't entered already though, I do have a giveaway of the iPhone SE 2020 that is going on, so I'm going to drop a link at the top of the description, but let's take a look at the current options. So you have the iPad. It starts at a price of $799 for 128 gigs, and you add a $200 smart keyboard and a $130 Apple Pencil, and the total brings you to around $1,100. But the other combination for the same price is to go with a Magic Keyboard and the iPad, which brings you once again to $1,100, not including a pencil. Which means a completely optimized iPad system, and I feel like the majority of pro users are buying some form of a keyboard, is easily over $1,000. But there's also another thing to consider. The MacBook pretty much starts at the same price, and with MacBooks depreciating faster as of late, you may even be able to find a 13-inch Pro for a comparable price. Or for the price of $329, you can also get the starter iPad, which is pretty much the same price as the keyboard, because I can assure a majority of users won't be using all the capabilities of the iPad Pro's processor. And if you're a student, make sure you don't forget to use the Apple EDU site to get your discount. So I've had this iPad Pro since the 2018 model came out, and I've had a pretty good experience with it. I haven't really used it to its full advantage in terms of artistic use and all the power, video editing that you can even do on this, but for the most part, I have loved it, and I've even tried to switch completely to a tablet and getting rid of every single MacBook a couple months ago, and I just really didn't feel like it was a laptop replacement. When the Magic Keyboard came though, I feel like that did change my opinion a little bit, and I can tell you right off the bat that the keys are amazing to type with. It just gives you that laptop-like experience with the same hardware for the most part. As for the finish, it is the same familiar soft touch silicone that you're going to find on the iPad Smart Keyboard as well. It is almost quite similar to the ones found on the Apple silicone cases, which I've been using as my main case for the iPhone for many years now. Although it collects irregular dust and fingerprints, and I'm not someone who drops my iPad on an everyday basis, I've taken the Smart Keyboard case around the world on flights, airports, and everything, and it still looks brand new. And I also love the fact that it has a backlight, and you can finally see when you have caps lock on this keyboard. With the recess in the keyboard and everything, I would almost say that it makes it feel more tactile and comfortable to type with than on the MacBook, because it has this soft touch finish to it as opposed to solid aluminum that you're pressing on. So for those who are wondering how it compares to the experience of an Apple Smart Keyboard, which comes in at a lower price, I would say that it is actually a pretty big improvement, both in terms of the magnets and the keys, because it almost feels a bit mushy. And even though I didn't have any major complaints of the keyboard on the iPad before, it just didn't feel like the same experience that you would get on a laptop or on a desktop Apple computer, where I was very used to typing very fast on. It weighs more than a MacBook Air, yes, but the counterbalance-like design needs this type of weight to support the system effectively. With the weight being well distributed, it isn't as bad as you might think, though I was skeptical when it first arrived that this tablet was no longer going to come in at a tablet weight. But I would be lying if I said the 25% weight gain was not noticeable, especially as someone who usually brings a laptop along when traveling. The magnets are also significantly stronger on the Magic Keyboard, and the hinge works well. Previously, the Smart Keyboard was for the most part quite good, but occasionally it slips off of the tablet portion, which kind of took away from the laptop-like replacement experience it was trying to become. Oh, and because you paid for it, you also get an Apple logo on the back of your case as well, which is something that the Smart Keyboard also doesn't have. Another thing to also consider when you're comparing it to a laptop though is that a laptop can get very warm, and more specifically Apple computers, when you have it on your lap after hours of use or you're typing and stuff, and that is where all the ventilation goes on. An advantage that you have on the iPad is that it just doesn't get warm because the keyboard is its own thing and all of the internals are in the tablet itself. Another advantage that could be applicable to some people though, like myself, is that I tend to eat and drink next to my computer a lot, and I've definitely spilled stuff in the keyboard. And if you have a MacBook and you spill something in it, it is pretty much toast. Whereas on the iPad, if you do that, you can just replace the keyboard itself and everything else is still okay. Although there are many third-party options out there, I've never really been a huge fan of them and have just used the smart keyboard for the past couple years, but I think the mechanical experience is unparalleled on this Apple version. I definitely don't worship or rely on the iPad completely as much as a lot of people out there, but I do feel like even as a moderate user of the tablet, this keyboard is a good addition, and I think if you use the iPad on an everyday basis, you're going to love it. On the technical side of things, it is a scissor switch keyboard that has 1mm of key travel and has essentially solved all the problems in Apple's previous era of horrible butterfly keyboards. Since the release of the MacBook Pro late last year, there have been no complaints of this new keyboard design, and I think they figured it out for good and is now one of the best keyboards in my opinion. I really feel like this keyboard fits right in between the old Apple keyboards as well as the butterfly generation that gives you a very nice, comfortable and tactile while also quiet feel. I do like a bit of feedback in the keyboards, and I feel like 1mm is the perfect medium that gives you both a satisfying and quiet experience, but with the amount of click lets you feel like you're getting something done. I think the most important thing that I noticed though is that coming from a regular size Apple keyboard or a MacBook Pro 13-inch, the compressed version on the iPad still easily adapts to muscle memory, and I can type the exact same way as I would on others. I find it a really good extension for notes and stuff, and if you're using tasks that are like an extension of the computer, it is also much easier to not get distracted with a whole bunch of tabs and programs open on your giant display and instead just focus on one or two things on your tablet. One thing that I do sort of wish I had though was function keys that would just make it easy to multitask and see your whole like menu of applications, but at the same time be able to change the brightness of the keyboard, because there is not really an easy way to do that right now. You just gotta like go into the settings and stuff, and although using the ambient light sensor is going to get it right most of the time, you may want to conserve battery occasionally, and just being able to quickly and easily change that even in Control Center would have been nice. Another small thing that I also noticed is the fact that my fingers would touch the bottom of the iPad occasionally when I'm using like the number keys up top. Not really a big complaint, but if you have large fingers, you might notice that. And I know like the whole engineering thing of having to fit it within a size like this is something that is factored in, but that is just like an observation that I noticed while using it. Another feature that they've also brought over from the MacBooks that makes this more of a laptop-like experience is the Trackpad. And I was someone who didn't really like using a mouse with an iPad. I just didn't really feel like a need for it. But after using the Trackpad here, I do feel like it has benefits in some areas, specifically when you're trying to do like Lightroom. And if you're trying to edit a video in LumaFusion, it is definitely a pain to have to like tap around and edit a long video. And especially when you're doing notes and stuff, having to use like a cursor on a large paragraph, the Trackpad has a huge advantage. The latest version of iPadOS brought forward trackpad support, meaning you can use your mouse and your trackpad, and I think the mouse option works quite well. One that I can recommend is a Logitech MX Anywhere line that lets you connect up to 3 devices and switch between them with a press of a button. It also comes with a slew of gestures that may take some time to get used to when coming from a computer, but they are for the most part intuitive, and here are a few. Bringing the cursor to the top left or right of the display will bring you to your notification or control center. You can also press and hold to activate long press features, and some of the gestures that are also included are swipe down with 3 fingers to get to the home screen, swipe left with 3 fingers to swap between open apps, and use 2 fingers in a text editing app to bring up the cut, copy, and paste options. Of course, we also can't forget about the stand function or the floating design. It gives you a range of 90 to 130 degrees of travel, which covers most scenarios and angles, but I do feel like it should have been more. For a tablet of this size, 40 degrees of movement is just not a lot, but I can say with confidence that this iPad does not easily fall off from the stand and is much stronger than the magnets found on the smart keyboard. As much as I tried to replace my MacBook with an iPad for a few months, the fact that it would occasionally slide off kept me from taking it seriously as a laptop. You'll also find a USB pass-through charging on the left side, opposite of the one built into the iPad, and from what I can tell, the charge speed is quite similar to the one built into the ports. I do like this feature because you're able to keep that wire out of plain sight, but I also understand the fact that it isn't going to work for any external devices or storage. At the end of the day, everything is transferred through those 3 pins on the iPad. Another small design suggestion that I do have though is potentially the idea of having a Apple Pencil or even like a miniaturized light version that can be slotted into this little gap right here. And I understand that like the whole battery thing and you've got like the charging mechanism here, but just as a concept and especially at its price point, I feel like people would still buy it if it was maybe $50 more with a portable version of the Apple Pencil, because as of now, it still straps in on the top, which is fine, but I know people have wished that there was an easier way to transport. Even though this Apple Pencil is extremely powerful and I've found the benefits in Procreate of doing art, it is very accurate, the 120Hz display. I feel like for some business users who just have this as an on-the-go machine, being able to mark up PowerPoints, notes, and just do some very general drawing that doesn't need all the power of this full pencil would really enjoy something like a stylus that is built in. So at the end of the day, do I think this Apple Magic Keyboard is worth it? And as someone who was very skeptical and almost wanted to dislike it because of its price point, even though it looked kind of cool, I have to say it is something that has kind of changed the way that I use my iPad more than I expected to, because I thought my smart keyboard was perfectly fine. Even though I've tried to give the iPad a chance as my kind of laptop replacement, I simply can't do that because on WordPress and Shopify and stuff and using Photoshop, the experience and the file system on the iPad is just not there. And I feel like software still has a larger role in defining the experience more than hardware. And although this brings you one step closer, I don't think it is a laptop replacement yet. Does it make it more useful, and will you use this tablet more because of this accessory? I think the answer to that is yes. In just the first few days that I've had this keyboard, I have used my iPad so much more with my computer and my everyday workflow, and it just makes me want to use this. And this entire video was like planned on the iPad, and I did find that it did speed up my workflow as someone who just gets so distracted on a computer. I think if you look at the state of the iPad lineup today, there's a few things to really take away. The amount of power that is packed inside of Apple's chips, like we saw in the 2020 model where they pretty much reused the 2018 chip and was already very much ahead of its field, shows that Apple has all the capabilities from a technological standpoint in their own chips. And we're gonna start seeing that on laptops next year. I'm super excited for that, but at the end of the day, iPad OS still seems to have like a weird place in the ecosystem, being not like a laptop replacement, but in some ways is a great ecosystem that has been redefined in tablet-specific applications on the App Store, which are getting closer to a desktop-like experience. But like I said, with the file system and with kind of like a mixed experience in different applications and kind of like the direction that they really want to go with, I just don't feel like it is something that could completely replace something like a MacBook Pro or MacBook Air, especially at the amount of depreciation that you're going to be able to find these things in recently. But I think if you gave me $1,500 and gave me the decision between a iPad Pro 13-inch with the Magic Keyboard and a pencil versus a MacBook Pro to do all my work on, including video editing, photo editing, and running all the businesses, I think the smart decision would be to go with the MacBook, because there's just certain things that I still can't get done effectively on the iPad. With that being said though, I still love this. I have no plans to get rid of it, and if anything, I plan to use it for more things, including drawing and Procreate. So I think it is just down to software and giving a desktop experience or a desktop mode to this tablet, because it definitely has the power to do so. If you guys enjoyed this video though, make sure you drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in my next video.